So let's get started with our tutorial. First, you're going to need 4 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch squares, and then that's going to be of your background fabric. And then you're going to need 2 4.25 inch squares. This is to make your half square triangles. You'll also need some of the half square triangle fabric that you're going to be using, and you'll also need to trim those to 4.25 inch squares as well. Next, you'll be cutting your half rectangle triangles, and you'll be using your template that's provided in your materials to make these. These are the half rectangle fabric triangles, and then you're going to get a 6.5 inch wide strip, and you can do this for the fabric for the half rectangle triangles as well. And you'll use your template. I have used template plastic to make my template here. You can use cardboard or pretty much anything that's relatively durable. And here's just the sheet of the big template plastic that I used. So I traced it. I traced the design that is going to be in your materials, which I'm about to show you here. So there's the design. I traced that using a Sharpie marker, and then I just cut it out. And be sure that you have those beveled edges as part of your template. That'll come in handy for positioning your triangles later. And this is the process that you're going to use to cut all of these half rectangle triangles. You'll take that strip that's 6.5 inches wide, and you'll line up your template to the sides there, and then you're going to cut using your rotary cutter. And then you'll just continue using the same type of process, flipping the template. Lining up on each side, lining up your ruler, and then getting your rotary cutter and trimming. And then I just sped up the process here of doing the other triangles. There is another way that you can cut your triangles using the template. So pretend that that piece of scrap fabric is completely big enough to be at the size of the template there. I've used in the past just placing my ruler over the plastic template there and then trimming, but you run the risk of trimming a bit of your template off if you do that. So I found that butting your ruler up against the template and then trimming works best. So now you have your 4 pieces of background fabric, and you're going to use your plastic template there, or whatever type of material you've made yours out of, and you're going to put those beveled edges onto your fabric. And please be very careful. What I kind of do when I line up the template with the piece of fabric, and then I just take my rotary cutter and I just kind of come down straight and then wriggle back and forth a little bit. So there's one little beveled edge that you take off on the top part, and then there's 2 little beveled edges there. And then you could just continue the same process, lining up your templates and trimming off those little teeny tiny triangles. And that's it. That's the process of cutting the half rectangle triangles. There you go. You got them all ready, and you're ready to move on to starting to assemble your quilt block. So now we're going to start constructing our half square triangle units. I'm going to show you the method that I prefer, but use whatever method that you'd prefer here. And right now I'm using a friction pen, and this is a pen whose ink disappears with friction, hence the name. Heat ironing will also make the mark disappear. So what I'm doing is I am using the pen, and I'm drawing the diagonal across my piece of fabric. And I do that for both pieces of fabric. And these are the 4.25 inch squares. And then I take the background fabric, that's the 4 1/4 inch squares as well. There's the background fabric, and I'm going to lie the half square triangle fabric on top. We'll call it the orange scallop fabric. And then I usually don't pin, but I decided to pin for this tutorial. Feel free to do whatever works best for you. So now I have these all ready to go, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from the line on each side. So there's going to be 2 lines of sewing on these squares that you see. So prior to pressing, you are going to trim your half square triangle units apart, and you do that by lining up your ruler on that line that you drew with the friction pen, and then taking your rotary cutter and cutting it like so. You do that for both of these squares, and that will create the 4 half square triangle units that you need to make the quilt block. And then you press them open, and I just made sure to press to the dark side. So now I'm going to use what's become my favorite way of trimming half square triangles, and this is the block lock ruler. It's got a groove that you see there in the middle on the wrong side of the ruler, and that's where that ridge that you create using when you press it open and pressing it to the dark side, that creates the a little place where that ridge can kind of join into. You have to make sure that you put that block lock logo on the low part, the part you did not press towards. That's an easy way to remember, the logo to the low side. And so you just need to make sure that when you do this, you have to line it up where there's still extra fabric on. Our final measurement is going to be 3 1/2 inches, so I just made sure that some extra fabric was hanging over at that 3 1/2 inches. And then the fun thing with this is that you just kind of slide the block into the middle, and then you can spin it using the ruler and then line it up. And then I found that I did not do a super accurate job with trimming, so I'm going to go back and make that nice and accurate, because that's the best way to make your quilt blocks look excellent. So I'm just going to retrim there. And that looks perfect. And then I spin it again, and I line it up at the 3 1/2 inch mark. And you can use whatever preferred method that you like to use to make half square triangles. Again, I just find that this method works really well for me. I don't mind the trimming when there's just the 4 that you have to make. So the next thing that we're going to do is construct this unit here. It consists of your half rectangle triangle, your half square triangle, and your square of background fabric. So we're going to start constructing the half rectangle triangles, and those little beveled edges that you cut are going to come in very handy in this step. So take your background fabric and put it with your half rectangle fabric, and make sure you have it the right direction. It's going to create what looks like a relative rectangle there, and then you're going to use those edges, flip that up, and line them up. And then I found that pinning them worked really well with just construction. So I'm going to put in one pin, and I put it in a place where I didn't have to take it out as I was sewing. It was far enough away from my seam line that I just kept sewing without taking it out. And then you're going to repeat this with the other triangles. So the next step is to just sew a 1/4 inch seam right there on that edge, that long edge. So once you've pressed your half rectangle triangles open, we're going to then construct the half square triangle with the background square, part of the little corner block here, that I'll call it. And I find that if you lay out the entire block, it makes it a lot easier to not make mistakes. So I'm just going to take some time here and lay out the block. So here's the completed quarter block that we have. And then I'm going to lay out the half rectangle triangles, like you see them here. And then add in the background squares and the half square triangle units. And those half square triangle units go in the corners, making sure to have your fabric pointing in towards the center like that. And so now we're just going to sew together the half square triangle and the background fabric squares. Again, I like to return my units back to the layout of the block that you see here. That way it's a lot easier to not make mistakes. You're going to sew your half square triangle / background square fabric units to your half rectangle triangle units. And I find pinning is a really good step to include here. I don't tend to use a lot of pins when I quilt, but I did here, and I find that it really helped keep things lined up. So we are in the final stretch of constructing your block. You're going to take your 4 quarter units of the half rectangle triangle block. You're going to lay them back out into the block arrangement, and then you're just going to sew the 2 squares together into rows, and then you're going to sew your rows together there. So I've sewn my rows together, and I have pressed my seams in alternate directions. There and there. That way, when I do this last seam, my seams will nest, and it just makes a nice clean intersection there in the center.